Welcome to the War Academy channel. Today we travel to the times of the Emperor Augustus, to analyze how the Roman expedition that entered the south of Egypt was, during all the centuries that Rome emerged as the main power in the world. Today, we are going to see the incursion of 3 Roman legions through what is now Sudan, these being the 3rd Cyrenaica, the 12th Fulminata and the 22nd Dioteriana, in an attempt to quell the attacks of the African Kingdom of Cush. Although the objective of the expedition that we are going to see today is not exploration, we must point out that the origin of the Nile River has been something that has intrigued all the ancient cultures that have been present in the area. Already during the Egyptian Empire, there were many expeditions that were sent with the intention of finding the origin of said river, although it is difficult to verify how far each one came. Both the Ptolemaic dynasty, as well as the Romans later, continued to send small contingents with the mission of reaching the source of the Nile, which came to be worshipped practically as a divinity. The incursion that we are going to see next dates back to the year 22 BC, although as we have said, it did not have any of these intentions. However, it would be a few years later, specifically during the time of Nero, when around the year 60 and 61 after Christ, if a small group of Praetorian guards would be sent to said exploration. The result of this mission remains uncertain, and we only have as proof what the writers of the time left written, these being Seneca and Pliny. Both they and later studies do not agree and point out multiple points, to which this expedition of Nero arrived, being the most optimistic theory that they reached present-day Uganda. In any case, and although it is not known exactly what their progress was, it is clear that they went quite far into the course of the Nile, and the description they gave on their return about the origin of the Nile River is quite similar to the one that it really is. If it is finally real that this group of Praetorians reached these Murchison waterfalls in Uganda, we would be talking about a journey of more than 5,000 kilometers through the Nile. Once this introduction is done, let's see how the most important military expedition that the Roman army made in the place was. It all started with the definitive annexation of Egypt by the young Augustus, after defeating Cleopatra and Marco Antonio around the year 30 BC. As always happens when a new territory is integrated into the empire, during the first year said area is relatively unstable. To this, we have to add the continuous wars that were taking place along all the borders of the empire, which meant that Augustus could not fully concentrate on a given point. It must be remembered that, during the first decades of the reign of Augustus, wars took place in Hispania, Pannonia, Germania, present-day Switzerland, and Egypt. To deal with all of them, the empire had about 28 legions, and it was precisely during the last years of Augustus, when the Varus disaster occurred in the Teutoburg forest, in which 3 of them would be completely lost. Returning to Egypt, we find the African Kingdom of Cush, which was located in what we know today as Sudan, although at that time the territory was called Ethiopia. King Candace, ruler of Kush, had heard of the harsh wars the Romans were waging in Hispania, and he knew if he attacked now, the Roman response would be limited. Candace had another advantage over the Romans, because while he was fighting in his territory and his troops were fully acclimatized to the conditions of the place, for the Romans it became more complicated. A few years earlier they had sent an expedition through Arabia and it had partly failed due to harsh desert conditions. This was another information that of course the king of Kush handled. This is how for the year 22 before Christ, he decided to start an incursion through the south of the Egyptian territory controlled by the Romans. This Kushite penetration began with very good results, and they were able to destroy numerous Roman garrisons in the area, the most important being that of Elephantine. News of this raid soon reached the Roman prefect of Egypt, this being Publio Petronio. With his base in Alexandria, Petronius quickly rallied the 3 legions he had in the province, and along with the rest of the auxiliary troops, began their march south to confront Candace. When the troops of the Kingdom of Cush saw the Roman legions approach Elephantine, they quickly fell back without putting up a fight, knowing that they had nothing to do against the Romans in the open field. However, Petronius was able to reach the enemy troops and after getting ahead of them he cut off their path of retreat down the Nile. After some skirmishes in which he was able to inflict heavy casualties on the Kushites, his king and part of his army managed to escape and continued heading towards his dominions in the south. At this point, the Roman leader had already managed to expel his enemy from his domain. However, he now saw the opportunity for even greater glory and decided to continue the persecution in the Kingdom of Cush itself. Again, this Roman incursion was taking one by one all the cities and forts that they found in their path, and a small garrison of soldiers was left in each one of them, which, as is logical, was weakening the Roman army. The objective that Petronio had set himself was to reach the Kushite capital, this being the famous city of Napata. According to the chronicles of the time, Napata was attacked by the Roman army and was taken without too much difficulty. After this, everything was destroyed regardless of its historical or religious significance, as punishment for the insolence of their king Constans in invading Roman territory. Not content with this, Publius Petronio continued his march to the south, in pursuit of the Kushite king who had managed to escape from him. From this point, the Romans entered quite unknown territory and even led them to leave the banks of the Nile to enter the desert. After a few days of marching, the lack of water and the sunstroke wreaked havoc among the Roman ranks that we remember. They were loaded with all their equipment. Seeing that the advance could not be continued due to the sand and the heat, Petronio had no choice but to abandon the pursuit and turn around. While this was taking place, the Kushite king had managed to regroup and assemble a new army, with which he was attacking the garrisons that the Romans had established throughout his territory. So, the troops that returned exhausted after their adventure through the desert, were again involved in a series of more even combats. Finally, Petronio and Constans signed an agreement establishing a peace between both sides. This pact was favorable for the Romans, who were finally able to declare themselves winners of that conflict. Once this agreement was signed, Petronio's legions returned to their starting bases, loaded with the loot they had obtained in this improvised campaign. This Roman incursion that went much further south of Napata was one of the few that crossed that border during the entire history of Rome. Although the expedition that we talked about at the beginning, which Nero sent almost 100 years later, had as its objective the exploration of the source of the Nile, it is said that another of its objectives was to explore this Kushite kingdom, as well as other kingdoms of the area, because the Roman emperor had the intention of conquering these territories. In any case, after his death, nothing similar was raised again, and the Kingdom of Cush would end up disappearing around the year 300, due to causes beyond Rome. The truth is that throughout history, there have been many armies of all kinds that have entered the desert, and the result has always been the same. One of the most striking cases was that of Alexander the Great when on his way back to Babylon, he crossed the desert of Gedrosia, losing a very high number of his soldiers. As a final curiosity, comment that although it is in the form of science fiction, these exploration expeditions that we talked about at the beginning are somewhat represented in the second film of The Mummy. What did you think of this program? Do you find these types of expeditions striking? What topics do you propose for more videos about this time? I await your answers in the comment box. And finally, this is the end of the video. Thank you all very much, especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and see you in the next one. See you soon.